Welcome back. This is Arise News Channel. You're watching the morning show with me, Biola Alabi. My guest, Bimpe Nkontchou, is managing principal of W8 Advisory LLP, a wealth assessed and asset management advisory practice based in the UK. Bimpe advises high net worth African entrepreneurs on asset and wealth management, wealth structuring, and family business succession planning. She also offers essential advice on the value of sound corporate and family governance to support the growth and continuity of the founding owner's vision and legacy. Bimpe, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Bimpe, I did practice and I still got it wrong. Please say your last name again.
Nkontchou.
Nkontchou.
The N is silent.
It's the N that really threw me up. Nkontchou.
Nkontchou.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm so excited to have you on the show because one of the things that we've noticed in Africa and in Nigeria in particular is the lack of proper wealth management. I know that you work with HNIs on really about managing wealth and managing the preservation of it and the transfer of it.
Absolutely.
In your work, what is some of the most challenging things you've come across in working with Nigerian entrepreneurs?
I think that the most challenging thing is really having the awareness that's needed. I mean, people need to want to plan. People need to be aware of the reasons for. And I would say to people, one of the main reasons for any sort of planning around your wealth creation, you're planning for the eventual absence, the eventual dates that we all go off to the great beyond, death. Yes. And that's always a difficult conversation to have. I think many people just don't want to start talking about what's going to happen when they're not there. But the honest truth is that if they're really responsible about their wealth, if they really care about their family or even their business, risk management is about, planning for the eventual happening of something that you can't actually predict. And part of that planning means what happens to my family or my assets when I'm not there. And that's the biggest challenge I have with many Nigerian families, that clients don't want to start that conversation around what happens when I die.
Another challenge we have is around succession planning. So people set up that are very profitable with the intention that their children will want to take over. And then you sort of get into the place where your children don't want to take over. What advice do you have for
the side of the, I mean, in that situation again, as you're creating your business, and I have to say that, every time I come back to Nigeria, I'm really, astounded at the amount of entrepreneurship, not just from the older generation, but more so from the younger generation. And that's people I would say start early. So as you have children, you need to start mentoring them. You need to sort of start educating them about what it is that you do. What is it that daddy and mommy do that actually ensures this lifestyle that we have? And it's not about forcing them to become the lawyer or the doctor that daddy and mommy are, or, the media mogul that daddy is. It's about ensuring that your children are aware of the business, that they're schooled in some sort of financial literacy, because that business is making money, and they understand what it is to be a shareholder. Because even if they're not going to be a manager of the business, they're an owner. And the only reason that family businesses have lasted in other parts of the world, in Europe, in the US. I mean, we have big names that we all think about, whether it's Kellogg's, the cornflakes brand, or whether it's Walmart, or whether it's, Disney, exactly. The reason why they're still around, generations later is because those families were purposeful. They made sure there was a family governance, there was some sort of constitution, there were some rules and regulations around how the family business was to be treated. They ensured that all the children took an interest, and they ensured that at some point, even if an external manager was brought into the business, the children continued to take an interest in the governance. They sat on the boards. They were part of the family legacy. And they were proud and responsible of the fact that this legacy had to continue. Many Nigerian families need to do that, to start actually mentoring the children to be aware. When they come on holiday, let them see what it is that you do. Let them be aware. Let them discuss it with them. Communicate openly about the good and the bad and the ugly of business and what it is that you do. And that way, before you know it, the children are conditioned. And some of those families will find that without even forcing them to, that child will decide that they actually want to follow their father's footsteps because they've been there early.
One of the things that we were looking at was that, we saw was that 20% of family businesses in Nigeria don't have a plan for leadership successions. 3 have laid down strategies for wealth transfer, according to KPMG. And 47% of the respondents cited limited access to finance as their most important stay-awake issue. I guess they're trying to figure out how to continue to preserve this wealth.
Absolutely.
And then 42% were followed by fluctuating exchange rates. So these are concerns that people that have wealth are constantly concerned about.
Absolutely, yeah.
What are some of the ways that you advise people on how to prevent and sort of protect themselves against these?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a lawyer. I run a wealth management advisory company in London. However, my client base is Africa. So Nigeria is a big part of my client base. I come back and forth often.
So I'm just sort of like, just to talk about that a little bit. So you're based in London.
I'm based in London.
But you service mostly Nigerian clients.
I service mostly
How did that
Nigerian
sort
clients.
of evolve to be like the...
That evolved because I'm Nigerian. I was born and brought up here. I started my career as a lawyer here. I worked in a couple of the, very prestigious law firms here before I moved. I moved only about 25 years ago.
Oh, only.
Only. Time flies. Time flies. And when I moved, I realized that even though I wanted to continue law practice, I looked around and thought, where's the niche? Where's the area? There's a gap that isn't getting enough coverage in Africa. And actually, I found that even though we have lots of big, companies, at least growing up, there are many big brand names which don't exist anymore. And those big companies and wealthy entrepreneurs all had some asset base in London. They had property and all of that. I found that nobody was really advising them. All those people had lots of lawyers, corporate lawyers, advising their companies on the next big transaction in their oil and gas or manufacturing or telecoms. But when the company made money and the owner, entrepreneur, had all that money himself, nobody advised about structure, about how to continue his own wealth and how to also help himself in making sure that even if he sells a stake in the company, because he has to raise finance or takes a loan, how is he going to ensure, again, that the company stays, to an extent, within family hands? So I found that gap in the market and I sort of retrained myself. So apart from being a lawyer, I also have some qualifications in international trust management, qualifications in family business advisory. I'm actually an accredited advisor. And I also have a qualification as a member of the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments in the UK, which means I've got the learning tools. Now, I then created a company that I felt would service the African entrepreneur who, in his wealth creation journey. Wealth creation is one thing, and you're busy running around, building your business, raising the loans, raising the finance, attracting new customers, and making more money, building that bank into one branch to 10,000 branches across the country. However, you need structure. Structure would be usually through a legal framework. That company that if you build, you're a shareholder, your own asset holding structure, the way you hold your shares, the way you hold other assets, should also have some legal framework. Could be a company itself, and I know lots of Nigerians use companies to hold their assets. It could be a trust, because as the assets grow and they're in various jurisdictions, and you want to ensure efficient tax planning, and you also want to ensure that estate planning is, again, incorporated into the way your family assets are held. A trust or a family foundation, a private family foundation, are the structures I usually tend to encourage clients to look at. Now, apart from the structure, you do need some element of financial planning. I work with, in my team, I have asset managers who are very expert, senior people in the industry in the UK. And we look at a client and say, well, you've got all of this money. However, you haven't diversified. You've got too much real estate, for example. And we all know what's happened in the Nigerian economy recently by those who had overinvested in real estate. So diversification across different asset classes, diversification across different jurisdictions, different currencies, different financial products is important. You've got to also think of your money in several pots. You've got to think of the short term, the liquidity that you need, possibly to put back into your business, because most Africans will say, I'm invested heavily in my business, that's where my highest risk is. You've got to think of the medium pot, the one that's going to take care of school fees, mortgages, your lifestyle, and then you've got to think of long term, healthcare, retirement planning. Even if you're in your 30s today and you're building that amazing digital business, blockchain, fintech, telecoms, fashion, you've got to think about, I'm 35, what happens? We all live longer. What happens when I'm 90, when I'm 75, when I'm no longer able to work the hours that I work now? However, my needs are going to continue to increase. My lifestyle, my taste, And
so people are listening to you, they're like, well, you work with HNIs, but then you mentioned the 35-year-old. How can people, I mean, if you're a 35-year-old today and you're thinking about these things, because now they've heard you and they're like, okay, I need to start thinking about this. Where do they go? Like, what's the entry point for them into sort of an advisory?
I mean, you're right, and I mentioned them on purpose because I think the over 50s are well served. The ones who have made their millions. The private banks, both here and in the UK and everywhere else, will go after them because they've got the millions that the banks want to hold. And so, what I do is I do obviously service that, higher bracket, those older generations. So my client base is anything from 35 to 75, literally. But I find that Africa is a young continent.
Yes.
All the statistics show that, the wealth is being created in the hands of those in their 20s to 30s and will continue to grow. I find that they're underserved. The private banks, they have, for whatever reason, not really focused on that because they don't seem to have the money that they want.
Sure.
So what do? I make sure that I can help, I can advise. I do have some sort of toolkit out there that I actually make available to that audience. And in a way, part of my work, yes, is a commercial entity myself to make money, but I also want to influence that next generation and make
future customers.
Absolutely, future customers.
Get your hands on those future customers.
Exactly, and make sure that they start early. Make sure that the mistakes that again their parents and grandparents made in not having sound estate planning, not having sound financial planning, in not really sorting out the way the assets are structured, that the younger generation don't make that. So my advisory services obviously are more geared to those who have already created some amount of wealth. But however, as in my own personal and business space, I'm very open and available to the younger generation as well. And I do meet sort of small groups and speak to them very, very often.
But even then, even though you service that, there's still a lot of things that you say and that information you have that's very useful to everyone.
Absolutely. Yes.
I was at an event yesterday where they were talking sort of about similar things about wealth management and transfer. And one of the things that came up was asset registries. Apparently, this is something that people don't do a lot of. Absolutely. I would like to understand your experience and just help people understand what an asset registry is.
I mean, when you're thinking about wealth, people always think, oh gosh, I'm not wealthy until I have millions. And I say to people, your assets are everything that you have, whether it's your wealth is everything you have, whether it's your intellect, because that's going to help produce more wealth, whether it's your land, your cars, your jewelry, whatever, those are all your assets. Now, what you want to do when you're really being realistic about your financial planning, you've got to sit down and take a piece of paper and say, what do I own? And that's of value, whether it's art on your walls, whether it's jewelry, whether it's cars, land, real estate, money in the bank, and then what do I owe? Because your net position is really the reality of your wealth. So you can't think, and we know that lots of us in Nigeria, for example, we're very good about keeping up appearances. Those people drive around in amazing cars and wear amazing clothes and handbags. But really and truly, when they write down that asset register, it will make maybe a humbling experience. And when I start to advise a client, I say, let's actually understand what it is. Let's get our head around what are you actually worth. So it's really your assets minus your liabilities. And if you're in a negative net position, there's a lot more work to do in restructuring. If you're in a positive net position, there's lots of surplus. How have you structured that surplus? You mentioned wealth transfer. How have you that surplus? How is it going to ensure that it's transferred to the next generation in a conflict-free manner?
The other thing, too, that I thought was interesting yesterday was around part of what you were saying is sort of even when you sort of buy property in different places, in places like London. And I thought it was interesting because the speaker was really breaking down, even though you have property in London, the taxes on the property, and that in a way, you and the Queen basically share the deed on the home, on the property. Yes. Can you help people at home? And I mean, there are lots of people that have properties in other places that might not know the full picture of owning property if they haven't come from big corporate backgrounds where they understand legal and they understand structure. Give people a sense of people that are getting their money ready now to go buy that big property in London.
I mean, one thing with property I always tell people is no matter where you're from, the law that governs your property ownership is the law of the land where the property is. So if you're buying a UK property or the US property, you really should at least get some advice on what are the legal and tax implications of owning property. In the UK, well, everybody knows, and if you don't know, it's clear that when you die, the first and primary beneficiary is a taxman. He may not be in your will, but when you line up who gets what first, apart from paying, when you actually look at it, apart from paying any expenses for funeral, before your beneficiaries get that property, the taxman gets an average of 40%.
40%, that's what he said,
exactly.
yes.
So, there are ways, and there were ways until recently the UK changed the law. But it used to be originally, the UK, frankly, was a tax haven.
Yes.
The UK was one country where you could buy property and keep all the increase, the profit. You didn't pay capital gains tax if you're not a UK tax resident when you sold, and you didn't pay any death taxes if you were not, if you're a non-resident owner. However, that's all changed. And so again, like I say, the whole idea of whenever you want to invest in real estate and land in any country, you need to check what the current status is.
Okay.
And that's what at least helps you make. It doesn't mean you'll prevent you from buying, but at least you're going in an informed decision. That's making an informed decision, and you know exactly how it's going to impact you and your family if you buy that property. Because tax is now, I would say, it's
a global buzzword.
Topic.
It's a global buzzword.
I'm sure in Nigeria,
yes,
the way you hold your real estate, the taxes during and after are very relevant.
So, young people are listening. We're a young nation. 65% of our population is under the age of 35. Absolutely. How can young people start out on this path of wealth creation? Well, let's say wealth creation is something everyone's thinking about, but how do they start to sort of preserve that wealth, even with the little they have?
I have teenagers myself. My children are, between 17 and 18. And I think what we try to do is we say, listen, when you have your pocket money, you've got to divide it into three. 1/3 of it is your daily sort of expenditure, okay? 1/3 of it is your savings. And really 1/3 of it, ideally, should be your charitable giving. And if we can do that, and if it doesn't have to be 1/3, 1/3, that's what I say to my own kids, but it could be, 40% or, 50, half of it could be your daily expenditure, 20% of it could be your charitable giving, and 35% of it should be your savings. But you've got to always say to yourself, every time I earn, 1,000 naira or get, 50 naira pocket money, I'm going to take 25 for myself to buy my sweets. This is for young kids. I'm going to put 10 naira away. And if you do that, when we look at it, and as you get older, it becomes a habit. We're conditioned. They say when the young kids are conditioned now to pick up their iPhone and social media every day. It'd be great to be able to condition to say, every time I get some money. So with the kids, as they get older, like my kids, we have 2 bank accounts. We have your savings account, and we say every time you get some money, birthday money or what have you, you've got to make sure a part of it goes into the savings account and is locked up. And that's, as you get older, you then start to invest the savings and grow it. And, it's part of your pension plan. And, and all those habits are formed already. It's just that you take it to the next level.
So where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you? How can people get your services?
Thank you, and thank you for that plug. I'm based in London. I fly back and forth, but my website is w8advisory.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, but through the website, and there's an email address on there, info@w8advisory.com. And like I said, I'm available to talk, to guide, to consult, and hopefully to then be engaged as an advisor for a fee.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today on wealth management, preservation, and transfer. I think these are really key issues as we become more and more wealthy in Nigeria, and also as we become more and more successful. And so for all the entrepreneurs out there, they will be looking for you, and they should stay glued to your website.
Thank you. And I have to say that the growth of any economy is really in the hands of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end of the show this morning. I'm Biola Alabi. Thanks to my guests for joining me today, and have a great weekend.